Wait, before you scroll away. I need you to know something. That little girl in the yellow dress. The one who walked onto that grand ballroom stage alone, with one untied shoe, and made an entire room of billionaires cry. She didn't disappear after that night.
Mo.
What happened to Lily 1 year later? I still can't talk about it without feeling something break open inside my chest. Because the world saw her dance once. But what she did the second time, what she sacrificed, what her mother almost lost, and what one unexpected person did in secret. That's the story nobody finished telling. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will never look at the quiet people around you the same way again. Stay with me. This one matters. Welcome back, my friend. I am so genuinely glad you came back today because this one has been sitting with me for weeks and I knew I had to tell it. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Did you watch part 1? Did you feel it? Drop a comment right now and tell me what part broke you the most, because today we are going back. Back to Maria. Back to Lily. And back to a world that was quietly changed by a 3-year-old in a yellow cotton dress. If you are new here, welcome. We tell stories here that touch the deepest parts of being human. Stories about love, sacrifice, dignity, and the moments that sneak up and change everything. You are going to want to subscribe before this one ends. Now let's go back to where the magic did not end. It only just began. 1 year after the night that changed everything, Maria was about to face the hardest decision of her life. And this time, nobody was watching. It was an October morning, exactly 11 months and 3 weeks after the night Lily had walked onto that ballroom stage in her yellow dress and stopped an entire room cold. The trees outside their apartment window had turned gold and red, and Lily, now 4 years old, was sitting on the kitchen floor with her cereal bowl balanced on her knees, humming. She was always humming now. Little snatches of music that she picked up from her lessons, melodies that floated through their small apartment like something alive. She had grown. Not just taller, though she had grown taller too. There was something in the way she carried herself now, something quiet and certain, the way a child carries herself when she has discovered something she loves and knows it is hers. Miss Chen's early childhood dance program had changed Lily in ways Maria could see every single day and could not fully put into words. She stood differently. She listened differently. When music came on anywhere, in a grocery store, from a passing car window, from the radio in the laundromat down the street, Lily would go still for just 1 second, like an antenna tuning in, and then her whole body would soften and she would begin to move just slightly, just enough. Miss Chen had told Maria 3 months ago, very quietly, very seriously, over a cup of coffee in the studio office, that Lily had something she had only seen a small number of times in 22 years of teaching. She had not used the word genius. She had used a different word. She had said, "Lily doesn't perform music. She converses with it. That is not something I can teach. That is something a child either has or doesn't." Maria had driven home from that conversation gripping the steering wheel and not crying until she was safely parked outside their building. Then she had sat in the car for 6 minutes and let herself feel it. The enormity of it. The terrifying, beautiful weight of raising something extraordinary when you yourself are barely keeping your head above water. Because here was the truth that Maria held carefully and privately. The truth she did not share with Miss Chen or with Ethan or with anyone. Things were better. Genuinely better. Ethan had kept every promise he made that night in the backstage corridor. Her salary had increased significantly. Her hours had been restructured. There was now a proper family support arrangement for staff in the Caldwell household, something that had quietly changed the lives of 2 other employees who were also raising children alone. Maria was no longer drowning, but she was still swimming very hard. And the ocean was still deep. And then, 4 weeks ago, Miss Chen had called with news that changed everything. The National Youth Dance Showcase. Held every year in December in Chicago. The most prestigious youth dance competition in the country. Scouts from dance conservatories across the United States attended. Scholarships were offered. Careers began there. Miss Chen had submitted Lily's name for consideration 6 weeks earlier, not telling Maria, not wanting to create hope that might not materialize. Lily had been accepted. At 4 years old, Lily was the youngest competitor in the history of the showcase. Maria had sat across from Miss Chen's desk and heard those words and felt two completely opposite things at exactly the same time. A joy so sharp it was almost indistinguishable from pain. And a fear so quiet and specific that it had a number attached to it. The registration fee, travel, hotel, costume, accompaniment costs. A number that Maria had written on a piece of paper that night, and then folded very small and put at the back of her kitchen drawer where she kept things she needed to think about before she could look at directly. She had not told Lily. She could not tell Lily. Because how do you explain to a 4-year-old who hums music in her sleep that the door is open but you cannot afford to walk through it? What would you do if you were in Maria's position? If your child had been given the most extraordinary opportunity and the only thing standing between them and it was a number on a piece of paper that felt impossible? Would you tell them? Would you protect them from the disappointment? Or would you find another way, even if you had no idea what that way looked like? Maria folded her hands around her coffee cup that October morning, watched Lily hum on the kitchen floor, and made a decision. She was not going to let this door close. She did not know yet how she would keep it open, but she was going to find a way. Because that was what Maria did. She kept going. She always kept going. Maria had a plan. But plans made by exhausted mothers in small apartments at midnight don't always survive their first contact with the morning. She had started quietly. The way Maria did everything. She had not asked Ethan directly. That felt wrong in a way she could not fully explain. He had already done so much. There was a dignity in her that would not allow her to come back to the same well twice. Not for something like this. Not for something that felt like it belonged to Lily alone to earn. So she had looked for other ways. She had applied for 3 different Arts Foundation grants. She had spent 4 evenings filling out forms at the kitchen table after Lily was asleep. Careful handwriting in the dim light of their small lamp. 2 had come back as rejections. 1 had not responded at all. She had looked into fundraising. Had typed out a few sentences about Lily's story on her phone late one night and then deleted them. Something about putting Lily's story on the internet, packaging her daughter's gift into something people clicked on and shared, felt like it crossed a line Maria wasn't ready to cross. Lily's magic belonged to Lily, not to a donation page. She had picked up 2 additional cleaning shifts on weekends. She had sold a piece of jewelry, a small gold chain her mother had given her when she first came to this country, in a quiet transaction at a shop downtown. She had not let herself feel that one too deeply. And still the number on the folded paper in the kitchen drawer was not quite reachable. She was $340 short. $340 from the most important door her daughter had ever stood in front of. It was during the 2nd week of November that something happened that Maria had not anticipated. Lily found the paper. Not snooping. Not disobeying. She had climbed onto the kitchen counter to reach a box of crackers on the high shelf, because she was 4 and completely fearless about heights. And in climbing down she had knocked the drawer open and the folded paper had fluttered to the floor. Maria had been in the other room. She heard the drawer. She came into the kitchen and found Lily standing on the floor holding the paper, looking at it with a particular focus of a child who is trying to make sense of something she almost but doesn't quite understand. Lily could not read the words, but she could read numbers. Miss Chen had been working on numbers with the children in the program. She looked up at Maria. "Mama," she said carefully. "Is this about my dancing?" Maria's heart stopped. She crossed the kitchen and crouched down and gently took the paper from Lily's small hand. She looked at her daughter's face, those enormous brown eyes that had always seen more than they were supposed to. "It's just some grown-up paperwork, baby," Maria said. Her voice was very steady. She had gotten good at steady. Lily looked at her for a long moment, the way she sometimes looked at music, like she was listening for something underneath the surface. Then she said, "Mama, I don't need to go." Maria blinked. What? If it costs too much, Lily said simply, with the devastating calm of a child who has understood something large without being taught it. I don't need to go. I can dance here. And she pointed to the kitchen floor. Their kitchen floor. Linoleum. 30 square feet. Maria pressed her hand over her mouth. She pulled Lily into her arms and held her and did not say anything for a long time because there was nothing to say that was bigger than what her 4-year-old had just offered her. The sacrifice of someone who doesn't even know they're sacrificing. Have you ever had someone love you so gently and so completely that it made your own strength come back? Have you ever been saved by someone who didn't even know they were saving you? Maria held her daughter and felt something solidify inside her chest. Something that had been close to giving up. She was going to get Lily to Chicago. She did not know how. But she was going to. Nobody knew what was happening behind the scenes. But someone had been watching Maria more carefully than she realized. And they had made a decision of their own. 3 days after the kitchen floor moment, Maria received an envelope. It arrived in the regular mail, slipped between a phone bill and a grocery store circular. Her name was handwritten on the front in careful, precise letters. No return address. Inside was a cashier's check. For exactly $340. Maria stood in her hallway in her work clothes and looked at that check for a very long time. She turned it over. Nothing on the back. She looked at the envelope again. The postmark was local. The handwriting was neat. Controlled. The kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who had been taught to be deliberate about things. She thought about that handwriting for the rest of the day. And then, at 11 o'clock that night, while Lily slept, Maria sat at her kitchen table and she knew. She couldn't prove it. She had no evidence. Just the handwriting, the precision, the amount that was exactly right, not a round number, not a guess, exactly right, which meant whoever sent it knew exactly what was needed, which meant whoever sent it had access to information that only a very small number of people had. Victoria Hargrove. Ethan's former fiancée. The woman who had told Maria to keep her daughter out of sight. The woman who had stood frozen at the edge of that ballroom while the room erupted around her. The woman who had come to Ethan afterward and said, I looked at that child and realized I didn't recognize myself. The woman who had ended her engagement quietly and disappeared from their world 11 months ago. Maria had not thought about Victoria much. She had been too busy living her life to spend time on someone who had exited it. But Victoria, it seemed, had not entirely exited. Maria sat at that kitchen table and felt something complicated move through her. Not warmth, not exactly. Not forgiveness either. Something more honest than both of those things. Something that had no clean name. The recognition that people are not finished becoming themselves. That the person who tells your child to stay out of sight at 9 in the evening might be sitting alone somewhere at midnight writing a careful check for exactly $340. That cruelty and growth can live inside the same person at different points in the same year. She did not reach out to Victoria. She wasn't ready for that, and maybe Victoria wasn't either. Some things don't need to be spoken to be real. She deposited the check the next morning. She registered Lily for the National Youth Dance Showcase the same afternoon. And when she came home and told Lily, her daughter did something that Maria had not expected. She didn't jump. She didn't shout. She went very still, the way she went still when she heard music she recognized. And then she said very quietly, "Can I wear the yellow dress?" Maria laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and unguarded. She pulled Lily into her arms and spun her around their small kitchen and said, "Baby, you can wear whatever you want." Do you think Maria should reach out to Victoria? If someone who once hurt you quietly did something generous for you in secret, would you acknowledge it? Or would you let it exist in the silence where it seemed to belong? What happened in Chicago 3 weeks later was something that none of them, not Maria, not Miss Chen, not even Ethan, who had quietly arranged to attend without telling Maria, could have been prepared for. The National Youth Dance Showcase had never seen anything like what was about to walk onto that stage. and neither had the one person sitting in the back of the auditorium who thought no one knew she was there. The Chicago auditorium held 600 people. It was nothing like the Caldwell ballroom. No white roses, no golden light, no charity gala glamour. It was a proper performance space, austere and professional, with steep raked seating and stage lighting that meant business. The audience was full of dance teachers, competition parents, conservatory scouts with clipboards, and siblings who had been dragged along and were trying to look like they didn't care. Lily stood backstage in her yellow dress. Maria had found a way to keep it. Had washed it carefully after that night 11 months ago. Had let it out a little at the seams because Lily had grown. Had pressed it that morning in their Chicago hotel room while Lily ate breakfast and hummed. It was not a competition costume. It had no sequins, no elaborate structure, none of the professional polish of what the other competitors were wearing. It was a simple cotton dress with a small daisy embroidered at the collar. Several people backstage glanced at it. A few competition parents exchanged a look. Maria saw the looks and said nothing. She crouched down in front of Lily and straightened the collar and looked at her daughter's face. Lily was not nervous. That was the thing that struck Maria every single time. Every lesson, every small performance at the studio, every moment when another child might have looked to their parent for reassurance, Lily just looked at the stage. Like it was somewhere she already knew. Like it was somewhere she had always been going. "You ready, baby?" Maria asked. Lily looked at her with those enormous brown eyes. "Is the music ready?" she asked. Maria smiled. "Yes." "Then I'm ready," Lily said simply. What Lily did not know, what Maria did not know until the moment she walked into the auditorium and scanned the audience for their seats, was that the auditorium held a specific person that neither of them had expected. 3 rows from the back, in an aisle seat, wearing a dark coat with her hair pulled back simply, sat Victoria Hargrove. She had come alone. She had not told anyone. She was not there to be seen or acknowledged or to insert herself into a story she had partially damaged and partially, quietly, helped repair. She was there because she had written a check 3 weeks ago and had not been able to stop thinking about what happened next. She was there because she was a person in the process of becoming someone different and she didn't fully know yet who that person was. And she thought maybe watching a 4-year-old in a yellow dress might help her figure it out. She sat in the back with her program open and her hands folded in her lap and she waited. Lily was the 5th performer. The first 4 were extraordinary. Trained, polished, technically precise in the way that years of serious instruction produce. The audience responded warmly, appreciatively, with the respectful applause of people who know what they are watching. And then the 5th name was announced. Lily Ray's 4. Early Childhood Division. A murmur in the audience. 4 years old. Several people leaned toward each other. A conservatory scout near the front paused with her pen above her clipboard. Lily walked onto the stage. In her yellow dress. With the daisy at the collar. Her hair in 2 curls on either side of her head. One shoe, Maria would later realize, had its bow coming slightly undone. Some things, it seemed, were constants. For a moment, Lily stood at the center of the stage and looked out at 600 people. And then she did what she always did. She found her mother. Maria was 12 rows back on the left side. She was wearing a blue sweater. She was not in a uniform. Her hands were in her lap and her eyes were already full. Lily found her in 4 seconds. Smile. And then the music started. This time Lily had been trained. This time there was technique underneath the feeling, real structure, real form. Things Miss Chen had spent 11 months carefully and lovingly building around the natural gift that had always been there. The difference was extraordinary, and yet somehow the most important thing had not changed at all. The feeling was still completely, undeniably real. She moved through the piece with a precision that made the conservatory scout's pen start moving. She transitioned between movements with a fluidity that made Miss Chen, standing at the side of the auditorium, press both hands over her mouth. She held the emotional thread of the music from the first note to the last with a focus and a truth that most adult performers spend years trying to manufacture and never fully achieve. 600 people went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a performance audience managing their attention. The deep instinctive quiet of people who have forgotten they are an audience. In the back row, Victoria Hargrove stopped breathing. She watched this child, this 4-year-old in a simple yellow dress, and she felt something that she had been carefully avoiding feeling for 11 months. Grief. Real grief. Not for the engagement, not for the gala, not for the social position she thought she'd been building. Grief for the version of herself that had looked at this child and seen a problem. That had seen a maid's daughter and thought, not here, not now, not in my evening. She grieved that woman quietly, in a back row seat in a Chicago auditorium, while the woman's opposite stood on a stage in a yellow dress and reminded 600 people what it felt like to be completely, unapologetically alive. Lily ended the piece the same way she always ended it. Hands together at her chest, face tilted upward. And then the smile. The one that wasn't for the audience or the scouts or the competition. The one that crossed 12 rows and a blue sweater and landed exactly where it was always meant to land. The auditorium came to its feet. Every single person. The conservatory scout was already circling things on her clipboard with the kind of urgency that meant something real was happening. Miss Chen was crying openly at the side of the room. Ethan Caldwell, seated 4 rows behind Maria and slightly to the right, stood with everyone else and looked at the little girl on that stage and felt exactly what he had felt 11 months ago in a ballroom full of white roses. That clarifying, humbling recognition of something true. And in the back row, Victoria Hargrove stood too. She did not clap loudly. She did not draw attention. She simply stood with her program folded in her hands, and she let the tears come, because she had decided 11 months ago to stop being a person who managed her feelings into invisibility, and she was still learning what that meant. And apparently today it meant standing in the back of an auditorium in Chicago and weeping quietly while a 4-year-old in a yellow dress took her completely apart. After the applause faded and the lights came up, something happened backstage that none of them had planned, and it quietly completed something that had been unfinished for 11 months. The award was announced 45 minutes later. First place. Early Childhood Division. Lily Reyes. A full scholarship offer from the Meridian Dance Conservatory for future enrollment. The youngest recipient in the competition's history. Maria received the news standing backstage holding Lily in her arms, and she did not say anything for a long time. She just held her daughter and breathed and felt the weight of 6 years of rough hands and dark circles and kept going and never stopped and always. For you settle into something that was not an ending but felt, finally, like a foundation. Miss Chen was beside herself. She kept saying things and then stopping and then saying other things. She had been coaching for 22 years. She had sent students to conservatories before. But not like this. Not at 4. Not in a yellow cotton dress with a daisy at the collar. Ethan found them backstage. He had navigated his way through the crowd with his assistant trailing behind him looking slightly overwhelmed. He looked at Maria and Lily and smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had learned something important about himself 11 months ago and had been quietly, consistently trying to live differently because of it. First place, he said. First place. Maria agreed. He looked at Lily, who was eating a cracker someone had handed her with complete serene focus, fully unconcerned with the enormity of what had just happened to her, because she was 4 and there was a cracker. Ethan laughed. Real one. She's extraordinary, he said. I know, Maria said. And for the first time, she said those 2 words without any grief underneath them. Just truth. Clean and full and hers. It was 20 minutes later, when the backstage area had thinned and Lily was sitting in a folding chair with her award in her lap studying it seriously, that Maria looked up and saw her. Victoria was standing at the edge of the backstage entrance. She had not come in. She was standing at the threshold, which felt right, which felt like the only honest place for her to stand. She was in her dark coat, her hands at her sides, and she was looking at Lily with an expression that was entirely unguarded in a way that her face had never been in the 11 months Maria had known her before. Maria looked at her for a long moment. Victoria met her eyes. Neither of them spoke. There was too much to say for speaking to be the right tool for it. There was the evening of the gala. There was the corridor. There was the cold, precise voice saying stay out of sight, and the memory of carrying Lily away from the music. There was the check with no return address. There were $340 written in careful handwriting. There was the back row of an auditorium, and a woman learning to let herself feel things, and a little girl in a yellow dress teaching her how. All of it lived in the space between them. And then Maria did something that surprised even herself. She nodded. Just that. One small, honest nod. Not forgiveness, not exactly. Not an erasure of what had happened. Something more real than both of those things. An acknowledgement. A recognition. You were there. Changed. See it. We are not the same as we were, and neither are you, and that matters. Victoria's eyes filled. She nodded back. And then Lily looked up from her award and saw the woman at the door and stared at her with the fearless, curious gaze of a child who has no history with anyone yet and said, "Hi." Victoria let out a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else entirely. "Hi," she said softly. Lily held up her trophy. "I got first." "I know," Victoria said. "I saw." Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back to examining her award. And that was all. No dramatic reconciliation. No long speech. No orchestrated moment of redemption. Just a small girl in a yellow dress being entirely herself, which was, when you thought about it, exactly how all of this had started. Maria looked at her daughter and felt something she wanted to remember exactly as it was. The weight of Lily in the folding chair. The cracker crumbs on her dress. The trophy in her small hands. The daisy at her collar. The bow on her left shoe, slightly undone because some things are just constants, and maybe that is not something to fix but something to love. Have you ever stood inside a moment and known, while it was still happening, that this is one of the ones you will carry? This was one of those moments. So here is what this story kept asking me, long after I finished writing it. We talk a lot about the people who are seen. The ones on the stage, in the spotlight with the microphone. We build stories around them. We remember their names. But Maria lived for 6 years inside walls that belonged to someone else. And she was seen every day and noticed almost never. And Lily sat in a gray corridor with no audience and no mirror and no applause and learned something luminous and true all by herself. And Victoria spent years being polished and deliberate and certain. And it took a 4-year-old in a yellow dress to show her that certainty had made her into someone she didn't recognize. All 3 of them changed. Not because the world finally gave them something. Because they kept going when keeping going was the hardest thing. Because they were brave enough to walk through the door when it finally opened. Because one of them was generous enough to open a door for someone else without asking for credit. The moral of this story is not that talent always wins. Does not always win. The moral is that love shows up. Quietly, stubbornly, in yellow dresses and folded checks and small honest nods across backstage rooms. Love shows up. And if you have someone in your life who keeps going, who hummed in the kitchen this morning, who cleaned something that wasn't theirs, who sacrificed something small and didn't say so, who is sitting in a gray corridor somewhere practicing something beautiful that you haven't noticed yet, see them. That is the whole story. That is all of it. See them before they have to walk onto a stage to prove they exist. If this story moved something in you, please hit that like button right now. Not for me. For Maria, who kept going. For Lily, who answered the music. For every quiet person in your life who deserves to be seen. Drop a comment and tell me, what part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it the check with no return address? Lily offering to just dance on the kitchen floor? Or the moment Victoria stood in the back of that auditorium and finally let herself feel something real? I read every single comment. Every one. If you are not subscribed yet, please do it now. We tell stories here that stay with you. And there is so much more coming. Until next time, take care of each other. See the people in front of you. They might just be learning to fly.